Okay, so today we're going to continue on learning kind of basic modeling in Rhino. So last class we took a break, we did some V-Ray. Today we're going to go back in and continue on learning to model certain things. For the next several classes, I have some scripted objects that I'm going to have everybody make. Some of you, it looks like you've already started on some of the stuff that I'm doing today. The reason that I have the object set up the way it is because I'm trying to teach you certain strategies for how do you model things and how do you start modeling things. And so we'll kind of work through it, and I'll teach you a variety of different techniques. We'll bring back in some V-Ray stuff just so that we don't forget it. But it's really about learning certain tools and how they work, etc. So today we're going to work with kind of basic rectangular type objects that are a little bit more complicated, and then we'll work through kind of editing corners and chamfering surfaces and that sort of thing. Next class we'll do a bunch of tubes and pipes and sweeps and stuff like that. So it's about kind of learning some basic modeling techniques, and that's really what we want to focus on today. So we are going to create a brand new document in Rhino. So on the little splash screen as you open it up, you want to pick large objects inches as your default template. If you happen to have already clicked through the screen and you already have a new document open, that's fine. You just want to make sure that your units are in inches. Everything that we're modeling will be in inches today. Okay, and so I've written up a lot about how you're going to go through a building, what it is. One of the things that I did want to point out is you'll notice, for example, in step 2, I say we're going to use the rotate 3D command. Do you see how rotate 3D is in a different font? It looks like a typewriter. Okay. Whenever I use that font, either online or on the paper handouts, that means that's something you can type in instead of finding the command through the menu structure. So it's just something to be aware of and to start getting used to. Your speed will improve dramatically as you start to use the command line. So I like to at least show you what the commands are and get you thinking in that direction. Okay? All right, so we're going to start by drawing the shape that's in the lower right corner of your handout today. And so I'm going to work starting in the top view to draw this shape. There are, of course, a variety of ways of doing this drawing. I'm going to show you how I would go about doing it using coordinates, lengths, distances, etc., so that you kind of see why certain strategies might be beneficial and why they might not be. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my polyline tool, which is right below my arrow. And I'm going to start at point 0, 0, and I'll actually type in 0, 0 so that I know it starts right at that point. And then I'm going to type in a distance followed by a direction. So in this case, we have 36 inches tall. So I'm going to type in 36 inches, enter, and then I'm going to say, yes, I want it going in the positive y direction. Then I need to go over by 4 inches, so I'll go ahead and type 4 inches, and I'll go over in this direction. Now, the next piece of this slopes out to the side, and because it slopes out to the side, I could do some math. I could figure out what the angle was. I could make a little guide that goes over 2 inches and down 36 inches, or I could use those relative coordinates that we talked about on that first day of two-dimensional drawing. So I would do that by typing the @ sign to start. So @, and I know I want to go -2 inches in the x direction, so I'll type -2, and then comma -36, because I'm going down in the negative y direction. And I get that sloping piece without having to do any extra math or anything. So there's a perfect example of where the absolute and relative coordinates, specifically the relative coordinates, can be very, very valuable for you. So now I'm going to go down by 6 inches. Oops. There we go. Again, it's straight down. Now here I'm going to do that relative coordinate again. So I'll do @ this time it's going to be positive 30 inches. So 30 inches, comma, and it's going to go down 6 inches, so it would be -6 inches. There it is. Okay. Once again, I'll do those relative coordinates. I'll say @ and this time we're going to go 30 inches again. But this time it's going to be positive 6 inches. And I create that side. I'll go up by 6 inches. Enter. There it is. Once again, relative coordinate at -2 inches, comma 36 inches. There's that piece. 4 inches, 36 inches, not 366, 36 inches. And I'll press C for close. And I now have that shape. Okay? So just because I did it that way doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. I'm just trying to emphasize this is one way of doing it. Okay? Now I could also save myself a little time and draw only part of it. So let's say that I'm over here, I'm going to draw it again. A lot of you are still catching up drawing it in the first place, so having me draw it again is not a bad thing. Okay? So let's say this time I'll do half of my overall distance in the center here. So we'll do 24 inches over. I'm going to go up 36 inches. I'm going to go over 4 inches. I'm going to go at -2 inches, comma -36 inches. I'll go down 6 inches. And I'll do at positive 30 inches, comma -6 inches, enter. And now I have half the shape. So I saved myself by only drawing half. I'll take the shape, and I'll use my mirror, which is under transform, mirror. And I'll mirror from there to there to create the second half of the shape. Okay? So I only really had to draw part of the shape. And then I could take these two pieces and then join them together using edit and then join. Two curves joined into one closed curve. So I end up here at the same place as I did here. Okay, it's just a different strategy for how you do it. Okay, so now I have this shape, and I'm going to switch my view into the perspective view so that I can see this shape. And the first thing that I need is I need to take this shape and I need to move it into the 3 dimensions. So I've drawn it flat because it's easy to draw flat, but I'm going to use the rotate 3D command. And this is step 2 of what we're doing, to rotate this object so that it's standing upright. And I'll go up to my transform, rotate 3D, or I could simply type rotate 3D, which is what it says by that different font. And it's going to say start of rotation axis. And we did this before, earlier in the semester. This is the line around which we want to rotate our objects. So I'm going to rotate from here to there. And my angle or reference point is going to be going up to the side here. And I want it to go straight up and down, like that. Okay? So I end up with the same curve that I drew, only this time it's standing up in the vertical position, which is what I wanted. Okay, so now that I have it standing up, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to offset this command. And I can do this by typing offset or going to curve, offset curve, I think. Yeah, curve, offset, offset curve. Right? I always type in offset, but again, either way it's fine. And first thing is I need to specify a distance. My distance is going to be 4 feet. So I'll type in 4 followed by apostrophe and then enter. Okay, so now we're running into a bit of a problem. Okay, do you guys see how right now, if I were to offset this, I'd end up with a shape that's bigger but in the same plane? Okay, I don't want it that way. So when I do the offset, I can switch my view. And of course, it's not going to let me do it. I'm going to come up here to my option here where it says in C-plane. It says no. I'm going to say in C-plane, yes. And now look, the offset's going in this direction rather than getting bigger. Okay? So I switch that in C-plane, and we get this result. So now I have one object and a second object. I need to start to create some surfaces between these objects. Okay? Now, from a technical standpoint, because these are continuous polylines, I could take each of these objects and I could loft them together. So I could take each of these, I could go to surface, loft, and default options would be fine, and say OK. And I'd end up with a set of surfaces that goes around. Okay? But for the sake of practicing, I'm going to have you take these objects and explode them. It's also under Edit, Explode, instead of typing explode. And once you've done that, you'll be able to select just curves that are opposite each other. So this curve, and then I'll do surface loft, and I've created that first curve. We'll come here, and we'll do from there to there, surface, and then loft. Okay. If I did it all the way around, I would want to explode the polysurface, because long term we're going to want separate surfaces for what we're creating. Okay? So I'll continue to work my way around. Again, 2 at a time. We'll loft. Right-clicking, by the way, repeats the last command, which can be a faster way of getting through this. So there, right-click, OK. There, right-click, OK. And I'm going to work my way around my objects here. Perfect. And the last one, right there, right-click, and OK. I do hold down Shift when I select both of those curves so that they're selected. Okay. All right. So now that I've done that and I've lofted it, I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple little diagonal lines that may or may not help me. I think it's helpful to draw them because when I'm talking about it, it'll start to make sense how I'm dividing this up. I'm going to draw a polyline that goes from this corner to that corner. I hit Enter when I'm done, and I'll draw one that goes from this corner to that corner. I'll hit Enter when I'm done. I'll draw one that goes from this corner to that corner, Enter, and one that goes from here to right there, and Enter. Okay? Those are just guides right now for how I'm going to divide up the surfaces that are on the end. Okay? So I'm going to do this in a variety of ways. It doesn't really matter which tool you use. I'll start by showing you the patch tool. So for patch, we need curves that go all the way around where we want our surface. So in this case, I'm working my way around. Oops. Remember, if I select something by accident, I can switch and hold down the Control key and deselect, and then switch back to the Shift key. So now I have all the way around this object. I can go up to Surface and then Patch. 2 by 2. U spans and V spans should be 2 and 2. And I'll say OK. And it gives me a little surface. So that's one way of creating a surface. I could also take this surface, or this curve, and that curve, and I could loft those two and say OK. That would also create a surface. You see how the ISO curves are slightly different on each surface? It shows you that you created them in different ways. It doesn't matter for what we're doing today what they look like. Okay. The other thing that I could do is I could do a surface from 3 or 4 corner points. And I could do it, say, 1, 2, 3, Enter. Okay. Likewise, I could do 1, 2, 3. Oops. I didn't get the right spot here. Let's try that one more time. 1, 2, 3, and Enter. Okay. Now this last piece here is a little bit more complicated because it has 5 sides instead of 4. I can do 2 separate 4s. So I could do 1, 2, 3, and 4 like that. That would be fine. Or I could select all the curves that go all the way around. So we'll take this, and this, and this, and that, and that. They go all the way around and go up to Surface Patch. So in this case, I have 5 curves that represent the bottom, and I've made one surface out of those. So there's just a variety of ways of creating it, right? And I'm trying to show you different ways of trying to work through this, because as soon as you get an exercise or an assignment where you have to model it yourself, you have to come up with, how do I model this? Right? Right now it's scripted. This is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. But at some point you're going to have to do this by yourself. So I have all of these surfaces. If I hold down Shift and select them all, right, I could then mirror those to the back side so that I didn't have to draw them again. So to me that makes a lot of sense. So we'll go up to Transform, Mirror, and I'll mirror across the center of my object, there and there. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause talking for a little while, let you work for a little bit, and then in about 15 minutes I'll come back and show you the next piece. So I've made it through step 7, right? Then I'm going to pause and I'll continue with step 8 in a little bit. I want to continue kind of talking through where to go from here. Okay? So in this case, I already have my shapes done in that context, but I want to add some more detail. And I'm going to do that using the chamfer surfaces command. I can type in chamfer surf, or I can go to surface chamfer surfaces right here. And it's going to ask me for the first surface chamfer or my distances. And I want to edit my distances first. And when I click on distances, I'm going to type 0.5 inches, so a ½ inch. And then the second value is also 0.5. You see that by default it changes the second value too. So I'll hit enter one more time. So I have distances of 0.5 and 0.5. Then I will come in and select the first surface. So we'll try this one, followed by the second surface. And you see that I get that nice little bevel on the corner. Okay? I'll do the same thing. I'll right click to repeat. There and there. And I get a little bevel. All right, well that looks pretty good. How about the end? Let's go from here to there. Okay? That also looks good, but you can see that I'm starting to create these weird little pieces that are hanging on. Okay? So let me go ahead and chamfer then this, and maybe this and this. Okay, so now if we start to look at these, you see that I've got chamfers on all sides, but I've got little pieces that haven't been trimmed. Okay? This is where I want to kind of start to do some more work and really refine my edit. Okay? And so what I'll do is I'm going to come over to the polyline tool right here, and I'm going to draw a line that goes from this corner to that corner to that corner and back. And so effectively what I've created is a little tiny triangle that's right there. See, you guys see that triangle okay? You probably also will notice that as you're working with this, that zooming or rotating or orbiting can be very, very challenging. See how when I try to orbit and I barely move the mouse and it's kind of jumping off the frame? Okay? If I select this little triangle after I've drawn it, I type Z for zoom and then S for selected or choose selected here, it will reorient my entire view around this one object. So now if I orbit, see how I'm orbiting around that object instead of around some other object in space? So the zoom selected is something that long term, if you learn it now, will always save your life because you can recenter what you're focused and working on. Okay? So there I am, zoom selected. And now I'm going to use the trim command. So I'll go up to my edit menu and select trim. Or I could type trim. And then I'm going to select the object to trim. I already had the triangle selected. So that was my cutting object. And this takes a little bit of work about which way you look at it, right? And part of the reason that I like this exercise today is because it forces you to visualize in 3D and kind of see what's going on and get used to that. So I'm going to orbit so that I'm looking this direction, and I'm going to trim off that piece and get rid of those excess pieces. Then I'm going to orbit and look around more in this direction, and I'm going to trim off that piece and get rid of those extras. And so now, when we orbit around, we see that all I have left, right, is a nice clean triangle. So I'll hit enter to finish the trim command. Then I can use my surface patch, and I can patch that little triangle to have a solid corner on it. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. The fact that this curve exists doesn't really matter anymore. Okay? So I'm going to continue on right here with this corner, and I'll do a triangle from there to there to there and back over to here. Then I'll use that triangle again as a trim. So I'll go up to edit trim, and I'll orbit around and get rid of this part of it. Orbit around and I'll get rid of that part of it, like that. When I'm done, I'll press enter, and then I'll go to surface and then patch. and now that's nice and clean as well. Okay? So I'm going to pause again. I'm going to let you start working on it. Concentrate on the upper corners, and then we're going to move on and keep doing the lower corners, and I'll show you some more as we go forward. Okay? But concentrate on getting these upper corners nice and clean, and it'll give me a chance to help people as we go forward. Okay, so you guys seem like you're doing very well on the chamfer surfaces so far. We increase the complexity when we get down to the bottom, which is why I was saving the bottom for last. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with the chamfer surface, and I'll do it for here so that we get that. And then we'll chamfer this piece there, this piece there, that piece, and that piece. I'm working my way around. I'm not overly concerned about chamfering these edges. It gets a little complicated in that corner, and it's more than we need to really worry about. You'll never see it when you render. However, when we start to look at these bottom corners, if we look at them closely, you can see that we have some issues. And so one of the things that's important to recognize in the world of V-Ray is that if we were rendering this as a bridge with a bunch of pieces together, the fact that that corner isn't perfect doesn't really matter, because it's all going to go away when we render it. However, if we were going to 3D print it for some reason, or we needed to use the CAD/CAM router to cut out pieces or something along those lines, this would present a big problem because this shape is what's called not watertight, which means it couldn't hold water if it was full because it has this crack here. So we want to make this adjustment. And I have a couple options for how I can make the adjustment. And I'm going to show you a variety of ways of doing it so that you can kind of see. So on this side, I have the gap. And if I zoom back on this side, I have the exact same gap. So I'm going to do each of these sides differently, and I'll show you how I got to each side, or each piece. Okay? So let's start with this piece here. And I'm going to do this more the old-fashioned way. Okay? And what I'll do is I'll take the polyline tool. I'll start at this upper corner here, and I'll draw a line that goes down to where those two meet at the center here, like that. And I'll hit enter. This gives me a line right there that I can use to trim off of the little bit of the surface that extends past. So I'll do trim, and I'll get rid of that part of the surface there. Okay, so now that part's pretty clean, but unfortunately, this piece doesn't quite match up. So number one, it has a gap there, but also now it has a gap along the length here. But I can go ahead and just delete that piece, and I could use this curve that I just drew, and also the curve that's at the bottom right here, if it'll let me select it. Now I'll have to draw a curve there too. Let me go from that point right there down to that point right there, enter. And so I can now take this curve, and I can do a loft, and I can build that shape. See how they meet together nicely on all the corners, and they meet together nicely right there. Okay, so that seemed pretty easy, but it involved a couple extra steps. The alternative to that is I can actually modify this surface as a whole. Okay, and I can do that by turning on something called edit points. And if you look over here, there's kind of a curve with some dots on it. If I click on that button, right? No, excuse me, it might be the one next to it. Let's look, curves. Yeah, that's for curves. I have to do the one next to it. It's points on. If I take that and I click on the one next to it, points on, or I type points on, you see that I actually get control points for the corners of my surface. Right? There's a slight problem with this surface because it's already been trimmed once. So it's showing me what the surface was before it was trimmed. So I'm going to do two things. The first thing is I will do untrim, which is the opposite of trim. So untrim, select that edge, give me the whole surface back. Then I'll turn my points on for this shape. So I'll take this, turn my points on, I get that point right there. I can then select that point, move that point from here to right there, and I've effectively modified the surface so that it matches up right there. Then I can use this surface, this surface here, to trim that surface, and I no longer have that gap in the corner. Okay? It's just a different way of doing it. I got to the same place. I end up with the same look, the same surfaces, etc. It's just a matter of which seems to make the most sense. So the reason that I save these for the end is because they're the most complicated to work through. Okay? In this context, don't worry about chamfering the bottom here. Just concentrate on that. If you chamfer this, you increase the complexity again. So I could do it right now. It would be helpful if you made this meet up nicely first and then chamfered the next set, because it's one extra thing to keep track of. So there. And now I could do the triangle the same way that I've been doing it, like that. And then I could trim it. It's not necessary that you do this. This is more an afterthought. So there's trim. Get rid of that. And that. Finish, patch. Okay. And we end up with that corner. You can do that, but it's an extra step. Okay? So I do want you to concentrate on trying to do the bottoms here, because the bottoms are probably the most challenging thing you'll do today. Right? And so I've increased the complexity as you go forward today. These upper ones are probably the easiest to do. All right? The bottom here on the corner is the hardest to do. But it all is teaching you how to manipulate and work within the context of what you've been working through. Okay? So when you're all done, we're going to do like we did in exercise 204 to assign a material to this object. Right? So I have this put together. I'm going to go ahead and select the whole object. I'm going to go to my V-Ray materials. I don't currently have a material, so I need to load one. So I'll right-click and say Load Material. I'm going to choose concrete for this. Let me go to my V-Ray materials. Let me get to concrete. I'll just do a basic concrete. That's fine. We'll go ahead and open that. I'm going to right-click on concrete and say Apply Material to Selection. So now I have the concrete that's applied to this particular shape. And next thing I need to do is do a little render. Okay. I need to do a few things before I do the render. Number one, I'll put an infinite plane under my objects. So there. Notice that my object isn't tall enough. Right? I'm not seeing the whole object, so I'm going to have to move the object. Easiest way to do that is to switch from the perspective into the front or side view. And then you could just click and drag. The precision doesn't matter, right? So that it's above the ground plane. There it is. I have that. I'll zoom in a little bit, and we'll go ahead and click on the render button. And we'll get a little render of this little object. Okay? When you're done, you'll save this object. Remember, it's the little disk icon. Save it to your flash drive somewhere. Then you'll post this image. I don't need to see the actual 3DM file. I just need to see the rendered image at the end. Okay? If you want to do that image and then do one where you zoom in and you do a little render of the corner so you can see the way the chamfers come together, by all means do that. Okay? You can always upload more than one image. I recognize that the pattern of the texture isn't going to be perfect in these renders. We can see here I've got some pattern going one way, some pattern going the other way. That's less than ideal. We will cover how do you fix that later on. Okay? But for right now in the semester, you don't know how to fix it, so don't worry about it. Okay? Are there any questions about this? I know there'll be individual questions, but global questions? No? Okay. So I'll turn you loose to keep working on your own, and I'll float around and help you through the bottom because that's probably going to require the most help.